Hey there gamers, welcome back to the Board Game Co channel, and today we have a preview of Super Fantasy Brawl Reborn. Hey there gamers, it's Professor Meg here, welcome back to the Board Game Co channel, and today we have a preview of Super Fantasy Brawl Reborn brought to you by Simon Games. This is a sponsored video, so please keep that in mind, and everything in front of you is a prototype copy, all of that subject to change, and with that you might have noticed that Super Fantasy Brawl is already a game that you've heard of. So this is an upgrade, it's an addition to the game, so the old game still exists, and there is an upgrade pack that you can make all of your old champions compatible with these new champions, but that being said, this is a completely standalone game that all you need is everything that comes in this box. But that being said, I definitely suggest checking out their campaign page down below because there's a whole bunch planned for this campaign. I believe that you can play as Ninja Turtles, so I'm just saying it might be worth perusing and seeing what they have planned. But that being said, Super Fantasy Brawl Reborn, as you may imagine, is a brawling game where you're playing as these different fantasy characters. They all have their unique cards, and what you do is you can draft them in different ways, but once you draft them, you have 3 different champions, and with those 3 champions you shuffle all of their different cards together, and you're using that as your cards throughout the game. That you're using this to both fight off the other champions of the other team because it is a brawl after all, but you're also working toward different challenges which are going to be where you're going to get a lot of victory points. So looking at the board here, you can see that it is a hex-based map, and you can see that there are these different figures. Now each of the figures represents a different champion which has their card, as well as a reference card, which is really awesome. And then, as I said, they start with their starting cards. All of those cards are shuffled together to form the decks for each of the players between the 3 different champions that you have. So you can see that the pink player has this one, and this one, and the blue player has this one, and this one, and this one. So you can see how they're spread out throughout the board. Now, looking at the board, these would be spawn points depending on what color you are playing as, and some of them are just covered where the players are. There are also trap spots, which is where you have to place traps when traps are placed, and there are normally 4 in play throughout the game. You'll be pushing, pulling, walking onto them, hopefully putting enemies through the traps, and some of these challenges will award victory points based on those traps. And finally, we have our 3 statues here, which are the 3 cores of magic throughout the game. So we have manipulation, creation, and destruction, and those are the 3 colors that you are playing with, and these different rings will come into play again for these challenges, but they also thematically tie into the different cores that you are using to be spending on your cards because they do match in color, and I assume that it's the same type of magic. Once players have their champions picked, as I said, they shuffle up their decks and then draw 5 cards. Now at the beginning of the game you'll have a little bit of card selection, but after that you'll be drawing 5 cards every turn, and you'll be using that along with your cores that you are able to spend to play the cards, and use that to hopefully work toward these different challenges as well as attacking the different champions, hopefully bringing them to 0 health, because when you do so, the attacking champion that you used is going to get to become empowered as well. Now, I'm going to show you some of the cards and how they would be played, because after that, I think a lot of the other rules of the game are going to make sense. So, looking at our hand of 5 cards here, you can see that they have different colors up in this corner. Those are the colors that you are spending with these different cores to be able to do those actions. They also have different names on the side, and that's going to be the different characters that are able to activate them. Now, there is a type of card that is a reaction that other characters are able to use, which is going to add to your defense, but otherwise you have attack cards and main action cards. So we have Symphalis here, and in this action actually could be used with any color. This is the rainbow where it's red, yellow, blue, so you could use any of these to be able to use it, and where we don't have a blue in our hand, blue would be great to use, so we'll spend that, and then we would be able to activate this character. Now, this one is currently over here. Is this her? Yes, this is her. So she would be able to move 2, and then when she's in melee with someone, attack for 2 damage. Now she also has an ability called Swoop, which allows her to jump over things and then deal 1 damage to each enemy swooped through. So for her, what might be a great move, let's see, they're just a bit too far away. If these guys were a little bit closer, she would be able to move to here. Oh no, she would have to move to here. She would be able to move to here, but she would have to move on to the trap, which I think is worth it. So if she did that, she would move onto the trap, she would take a damage, so a damage would be placed over here on her card, and a new trap would be put out somewhere available. So we'd put a trap out here. But then she would be able to swoop 4 and deal 1 damage to each enemy swooped through. So she's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, landing on another trap, so I don't know if that was the best call for her, but she would be doing a damage to each of these as well. So let's see, this one would do an additional 2 damage to her. You guys, I don't know if that was the best example, but that's how swoop works. Swoop is pretty cool. Usually you can use it to jump over and do damage to people, but going to a trap to swoop and then landing on a trap, hey, this is not a gameplay, this is the preview. Alright, so that being said though, we were doing an attack, so we would do the damage to each of them for this, but then we would also attack for 2 to this character here. So this one is Garen, and he would be attacked for 2 damage. This player would be able to react with any react cards in their hand as long as they had the cores to be able to pay for it. Otherwise, the damage would go through. Now, you can see that he actually does have a shield up here because he's currently on his empowered side. So that shield would provide 1 shield for him, meaning that he would only take 1 damage from this attack. Now, the shield applies to attacks, which has this little punching fist, but the damage that she did for swooping through, because it is direct damage that is placed, that damage would still be placed. Now, looking through at our other cards, we have ones that we could pay for. So we have Grotus, and, well, this one's a reaction card, so we wouldn't be using that one, but we could use this red one. So we could use our red core to move 1 and then attack within melee. So we could use him to move up to here with that same guy that we just attacked, attack him for an additional 1, and then we would be able to push 3. Now, push is in a direct line, so push, he would go straight back. However, if we had attacked him from here and pushed him, we would push him into this trap as well. So you can see where traps really come into play because you are both trying to not step on them, but you're also trying to push, pull, and maneuver your opponents around so that they are also hitting the different traps. Now, another card that we would have been able to play is for this one, which is Heron's Strike, and this one has an ability called Affinity. So again, we could be attacking from where we are, hopefully working down on this guy. It is an attack for 2 damage. However, Affinity means that you would either get +1 movement or +1 to the attack if you are in the same color as what you use to pay for this. So if we were able to move 2 and move her 1, 2 over to this area, she's now within the yellow energy core for the creation energy. So then she would be able to get Affinity for that and attack for 3 instead of 2, which is definitely worth it because he does have shield. Now finally, we have an example of a card here where this one doesn't have any color cost at all, and that means it would be free to play. You don't need something available to be able to play it, and this is for this guy here that he would be able to move to and then root an adjacent enemy. Root means that you place this token there, and that's going to affect their movement in the future. Now, when we played this card, we would also flip this core over. So with everything that we played, we didn't use this card, but we played everything else with what we had available to us, including a free action. So all of your cards will either be sent to this discard, whether they were used or not, and then you will draw a hand of 5 cards at the end of your turn and flip all of your cores back over. Now, with what you just saw, you might not understand exactly why that's so important, but that's because you are going to draw your reaction cards. So for example, here we have a reaction, and lucky for us, it can be used with any color. But there are some that require a specific color, like the one you saw earlier that was yellow. So you really need all of your cores flipped and everything available to you to kind of decide when you should defend or when you should hold on to what you want to be able to go offensive the next turn. Now, we've talked a lot about the different actions you'll be taking, how you'll play your cards, and where your deck comes from, but one of the most important parts of the game is going to be the different challenges. So you will be attacking other players, and if you ever kill another champion of another player, you will get a victory point. But one of the things that you're going to be working toward are the challenges that come out throughout the game, which are also going to award victory points, because the first player to 5 victory points is going to win the game. So looking here, you can see the current challenges, and as these are completed, they will be removed from this board, and 1 new one will come out per turn. But at the start of every player's turn, you will check to see if any of these are currently completed. So for example, here we have Defenders of Creation, control the creation area. So in this current area, blue has control because they have 2 as opposed to the 1 for pink, meaning that at the start of the blue player's turn, if they still had control, they would be able to gain 2 victory points from this. Now the reason it's the beginning of their turn is that the other player basically has a chance to react. You kind of set up the conditions actions you need to be able to meet these challenges, and then the other player is able to try to stop you before you gain those victory points. Now, there are some with this ability that's called delayed, and that means that it happens during the game. So this one is delayed, move an enemy onto a trap. That means during your turn, if you moved an enemy onto a trap, you would get that challenge immediately because it was delayed. And for an example of some of these challenges for you that you can see, and they definitely vary in victory points as well, but this one is Teamwork Combo. This is another one that's delayed, but have 2 allied champions attack the same enemy. So that would happen during your turn when that happens. Another one is Hotspot. Have 2 allied champions in the same colored area. So that's where these colored areas come into play. Now, it is a bit busy with how many miniatures are showing on the board, but this yellow creation area is actually a full circle, so there are 6 spots touching it. However, for the manipulation and destruction areas, there are only 3. So those areas are definitely a lot harder to be able to do that with. And another one would be have 2 allied champions on separate trap hexes. So you'd want to separate them out, hopefully have them on the hexes that don't have traps on them. But either way, at the beginning of your turn, if you are set up like that, you would get a victory point. Now, that would also be a reason for an opponent not to push you onto traps, because then at the start of your turn, you would get the automatic victory point for that. Players have a hand of 5 cards, which does feel like a lot when you're playing through the game, but because you only have the 3 cores to activate those cards, it can be really tricky to decide what to do. So you have a lot of options, but a very tight decision space, especially when you think about the different reactions that you'll be doing, because that will cost you future mana that you're not able to spend on future cards, but it may be exactly what you need to stop your opponent from getting a victory point, so you kind of have to decide what's worth it and what's not. Now, another thing that you're able to do is your champions will become empowered. So if they're the first one, or when they are the one to kill another champion, they'll flip over and go to their stronger empowered side. That's going to make them a little bit better. For example, Egret here, she gains +1 damage and +1 movement when bloodied. So she's one that likes to be bloodied because she's a bit of a berserker. Once she has 3 damage on her, she would be bloodied, and then she would have that additional ability. She also gets a little bit of a boost in health, so normally becoming empowered will give you a boost in your stats and a special ability that you were able to use along the way. Overall, Super Fantasy Brawl Reborn is going to be a game that's very intuitive, where you kind of understand everything that you're trying to do throughout the game. The challenges are very straightforward and give you something to work toward, and you are definitely always just trying to protect your champions, have as little damage on them as possible, while trying to put as much damage on your opponent as possible. The hex grid is really easy to move around with. You can clearly see the different colored areas and the things that you want, and the traps that are around the board, and a lot of the different abilities line up in specific areas, so it's all very easy and accessible to understand. That being said, the decision space is huge, and you're going to have a lot that you are working with. Not just trying to hit these different challenges, but understanding what challenges your opponent is working toward and how you can stop them from doing that. But as I said, also working toward just brawling like you should and knocking them down to 0 health. You can check out everything that Simon Games has planned for the current campaign down in the link below. Like I said, I believe there are Ninja Turtles, so it is definitely worth checking out. I'm Professor Meg. Thank you all for watching the Board Game Coach channel, and I will see you all next time. Bye!